Today we are going to talk about biological sex. Most of the information I'm going to discuss comes from a woman by the name of Rebecca Helm, who is in the science field, so it's science-based. She's a biologist and assistant professor at the University of North Carolina, Asheville. Biological sex. There's other information we're going to discuss as well, all science-based. Biological sex has four main components that we know of, right? It's like the ocean. It's vast and it's wide and it's deep and it's dark, and there's a lot of stuff that we don't know yet, right? But from what we know, there are four main parts: chromosomes, genes, hormones, and cells. Chromosomes, genes, hormones, and cells. And we're going to discuss each of them individually. The typical and the atypical. So most of the time what I hear is people saying, oh, if you have XX chromosomes, you are female. If you have XY chromosomes, you are male. That might be typical. However, we are part of nature, and nature has numerous variations, and there's lots of different ways to put things together. So, for example, we've seen females with X chromosomes, single X chromosomes, double X, triple X chromosomes. We've seen males with XY, double XY, double X, double Y. This is just a handful of variations. There's all different types of combinations. General presentation. So chromosomes, typical, variations. Now we're going to talk about the genes, typical genes. If you tend to be looked at as female and you have XX chromosomes, right, female, or if you tend to be looked at as male and you have an XY chromosome, there is this specific gene, and it is very important in biological sex. It's called the SRY gene. And the SRY gene during embryonic development will turn on male-associated genes. So if it's attached to that Y chromosome, what will happen, and typically it is you will develop male body parts, essentially. Sometimes it will pop off of the Y chromosome and attach itself to an X. Let's see, variations, like such. Or it will pop up on an XX individual on one of the X chromosomes. In this particular instance, if you have that SRY gene in a different location than what is typical, what you could end up is having someone who has XY chromosomes, which would be considered male, but physically they look female and genetically they're female. Likewise, you could have an individual who has XX chromosomes, but somehow an SRY gene got attached to an X chromosome of theirs, and they would be chromosomally female, but physically male and genetically male. Interesting. Second layer. Let's talk about the third layer. We've talked about chromosomes. We talked about genes. Now we're going to discuss hormones. Most people know typical hormones in the female body are estrogen and progesterone, higher levels of them. And typical hormones in the male body are testosterone and dihydrotestosterone, higher levels of them. Of course, many females, almost all, have at least some testosterone and dihydrotestosterone, whereas a lot of males also have, right, estrogen and progesterone, lower levels of them. So this is typical. Keep in the back of your mind as well that in utero, when a baby is developing, the moment at which their genitalia develops and the moment at which their brain is washed with hormones are two completely different time frames. So things don't always match up. They don't always line up. All right, so hormonally, variations. What could happen, and this is if all the chromosomes and the genes line up, which they don't always, you could have an XX individual, so chromosomally you're female, genetically you're female, because that SRY gene is not there, right? But physically, you are female because you have female body parts, so to speak, but you have male tendencies. Maybe you have a deeper voice or you're growing hair in certain locations because you are hormonally male. Why? Your body, for some reason, produces more testosterone and dihydrotestosterone than the average female. Likewise, if you are chromosomally male, you have XY chromosomes, and that SRY gene attached to the correct location, right? So you're chromosomally male, you're genetically male. You might physically look male, but physically have male body parts, but kind of look a little bit more feminine, right? Because hormonally you're feminine because maybe your body is producing more than the average estrogen and progesterone than a typical person who has XY chromosomes. Another variation, right? The other thing that could happen with hormones, listen to me, oh my gosh, hormones, is that sometimes, right, your body doesn't produce enough of a specific one. So you could be chromosomally female, you could be genetically female, SRY is not present, right? You could be physically female. However, hormonally, you're technically non-binary because your body isn't producing the average estrogen and progesterone, or maybe not enough of testosterone or dihydrotestosterone either, right? Or what could happen is you have too much of a certain hormone or very high levels, elevated levels of all of them. And then what we end up is typically calling them bigender, where they kind of have a lot of both tendencies. So you could be chromosomally male, genetically male, because that SRY is in the correct location, right? Physically you look male. And then what you end up hormonally is bigender. You literally have high levels of everything versus basically having low levels of everything. Interesting. Okay, so we talked about, let's see, chromosomes, genes, and hormones. Fourth level, cells. Oh, cells have these wonderful things called receptors. Okay. The receptors kind of like, they hear the sex signals from the hormones. So when they're working correctly, your receptors in your cells are working correctly. Again, you can have typical female everything or typical male everything. But if you have typical female or male everything and your cell receptors are not working properly, right? Another variation can happen. So on a cellular level, your cells are not hearing the hormones, right? The female hormones are being produced, but your cells are not like absorbing them essentially. So you end up physically looking more male. And vice versa. On a cellular level, your body's not hearing, it's not absorbing essentially what needs to be, absorbed. And so you end up having a cellular makeup as if you're female and look physically like you're female as well. Interesting. Okay, so check out all the variations here, right? We have physical variations, male, female, both, neither. If anybody's ever heard of intersex, typically what that means is you're right, both or neither. There are individuals who are naturally born with male body parts externally and female body parts internally, or vice versa, female body parts externally and male body parts internally, or kind of like a mix of both in unique fashions. That's just the physical variations. Chromosomal variations, again, we have male, female, both or neither. Genetic variations, male, female, both or neither, that bigender and that non-binary. Hormonally, male, female, both or neither. And then on a cellular level, right, are those receptors working or not? So the question that Rebecca Helm asks in this particular situation that I was researching is, I wonder what your chromosomes look like. I wonder what your family and friends' genes look like. I wonder what your neighbor's hormones look like. I wonder what the state of any of these people's cells are. Are they working? Do they have working receptors? Do they not? How do you know? You don't know. You don't know. And she goes on to state how in her classes, she does not have students take those cells and analyze them on a molecular level because students might have a little bit of a freak out moment and maybe not the best location to take that on if they realize that their chromosomes and their genes and their hormones and their cells don't all necessarily align in the manner in which they thought they did. A few more things for you. Animals, also part of nature, right? I mean, we're humans, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But animals also have variations. For example, there are birds and there are insects that have thousands of different types of chromosome variations. I mean, even using different letters. There's bird species that have like ZW and ZZ. We're not even talking XY anymore. I mean, the combinations are endless. There's reptiles. Most reptiles, if they all start out the same, but if they develop in a warm climate, they end up becoming female. And if they develop in a cool climate, they end up presenting as a male. Wait, what? Yes, for real. There's some variations of flatworms, and I don't want to say this wrong, so I'm going to check my notes. that start out as male and later will become female because they lose their penis in a sword fighting contest. No lie, look it up. There's parrots and clownfish that will start off as male and then change sex because maybe they were a group of females with one male and that one male died. So one of the females will then become a male. Hello, nature, uniqueness. Cuttlefish, bluegills, they have males that act like females. Why? Because they want to be able to get closer to the females for mating purposes. So they will pretend that they're females and act like a female to try to attract the female. Slime, mold, and mushrooms have thousands upon thousands of sexes. Okay, so when you want to talk about the fact that we are part of the animal kingdom, hello, there's variations everywhere. This is not binary. This isn't two sides, right? It's a spectrum. Lastly, and interestingly enough, and this I came across in a different location, but there's a woman by the name of, oh my gosh, I'm going to pronounce it wrong, Julianne Imperto McGinley, excuse me. She found in an isolated village in Las Salinas in the Dominican Republic that there is this group of individuals, and not all of them have this, but a fair amount of them do, who have this beautiful scientific terminology called 5-alpha reductase deficiency. It's an enzyme deficiency, okay? And what happens is they will be born as females, so to speak, and all of a sudden, because of this reductase deficiency, right, that is meant to convert testosterone into dihydrotestosterone, they don't have enough, and then they hit puberty, and all of a sudden they get enough. The deficiency essentially goes away. That testosterone will start converting to dihydrotestosterone, and these individuals will literally, during puberty, grow a penis that was not there before. Truth, look it up.